I'm Tina Leakoff, and I usually work behind the scenes at the Center for Art in Wood, but I'm involved all the time because my husband has been the executive director and co-founder for almost 30 years now.
She's not officially on staff anymore, but my wife, Tina, is here. Unofficially, she's been working with me ever since we met. It's her 25th anniversary next month.
So when the idea of Craft Now Philadelphia to celebrate all of craft in Philadelphia came about, and then Masters of Craft came about, and 4 organizations decided to be part of it. It included the Center for Art in Wood, the Clay Studio, Philadelphia Art Alliance, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Each of them took a certain group of the 14 fellows that have been designated from Philadelphia or the region, who have worked for more than 25 years and are masters or super masters of their craft.
I'm Wendy Ellsworth. I am married to David.
Does he often come in with thousands of wood chips in his hair and beard?
He does, and I sleep with him every night.
I'm David Ellsworth. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I'm very happy to be here at the opening this evening, checking out all the wonderful fellows' work, some of which I know and some of which I don't know.
David Ellsworth was the only one of the fellows that I did know, having made a film about him when he was showing at the Michener Art Museum back in 2013. An amazing artist and wonderful guy, David creates exquisite vessel-like forms and told me then,
Now I'm known for this style of turning with a very small opening, very thin walls, very delicate, buoyant pieces.
in order to achieve his effects, he also became an inventor of tools and gouges that are now sold around the world. David said he is delighted that this exhibition is showcasing the work of the fellows as well as
allowing us to show work from the early days of our careers, and hopefully the viewer will be able to follow the different stages and phases through our careers to what they're seeing in contemporary work today. My work is emblematic of that because it goes way back into the 70s and all the way up until last year. So you're seeing objects that in concept could be made by different people, just by virtue of the changes that I've made and the directions that I have veered off into and explored thoroughly, I must admit, and then shifted back to that core element of the vessel form, which has been always my motif from the outset back in the 60s. I love the juxtaposition of the painted and burned pieces as sculpture to the telescopic forms, the emergent series that I'm doing now, which is sculpture, and then the tall sentinel piece, which is sculpture. And it's very exciting.
he told me about some older painted pieces.
They are from 89 to 91.
Why did you start painting?
As an exploration of surface as well as sculptural forms done on a lathe. 89 was the first of the 3 Bush recessions. Nothing was selling, and I said, well, if nothing is selling, let me go in a new direction and just explore and see what I come up with. And I just took that lead and went in that direction. Started in with color, started in with burning, just to test out what the potential was. And I did it until 1991, and then the market started to recover itself. And I went back to my vessel forms. I did sell quite a number of the solstice pieces to loyal collectors. That was very helpful because it's got us through a very tough period.
I wondered about one piece which to me looked distinctly figurative.
It is intentional. There is great movement. The back of the back is emerging out of the front of the front.
I asked David about another one of the fellows who seemed like a kindred spirit. Did you know George Nakashima?
I knew George very well. He lived about 40 minutes from me in Bucks County.
Was George an influence on you? You both have this feeling for the natural beauty of wood.
George was not an influence on me in terms of my work, but he was definitely an influence on me as a comrade in spirit, because we do really look at the soul of the tree. We can't do the work that we do, either he or myself, without understanding the nature of growth and what it is to take a tree, look at it, perceive what it could be, and then morph it into something else through our interpretation.
I'm Mira Nakashima, and this is the Nakashima booth at the Center for Art and Wood. My father was born in 1905 in Spokane, Washington, and went to the University of Washington in architecture, got a scholarship to Harvard Graduate School of Design, transferred to MIT, got his master's there in 1930. During the Depression, my father worked for the New York State Park Commission. He decided to sell his car, buy a steamship ticket around the world. He went back to Paris, then he went on to Tokyo and got a job with the architect Antonin Raymond, who had studied with Frank Lloyd Wright. Dad was sent to India and worked on the first reinforced concrete building in Pondicherry, India. He became a disciple of Sri Aurobindo and took on the name Sundarananda, means he who delights in beauty. He kept that name for all of his life, and it's what gave him the inspiration and the courage to do what he did. In 1939, the war started to break out, and Dad decided to come back to the United States, despite his wanting to stay in the ashram. By chance, he met my mother in Tokyo on the way home. My mother had also been brought up in Seattle, Washington, but they didn't meet till they were in Tokyo. They became engaged and married in Los Angeles in 1941 and moved up to Seattle to start their lives together. My father had seen a Frank Lloyd Wright building in California and decided if that's the way they're doing architecture in the USA, he wasn't going to be an architect anymore. So that was the beginning of his furniture venture. He didn't have money for good wood, machinery, so his first objects were fairly primitive. His approach was very architectural, very utilitarian. Because of the war, we were put into the camps on the Idaho desert. My mother was a mess because I was a tiny baby. It was not a very good place to bring up a baby. But my father had been a Boy Scout, he was used to camping out, and he studied with a Japanese carpenter. Between the two of them, they were set about to try to make our barracks a little more livable. That was the beginning of using found objects, not using regular lumber, because they didn't have any regular lumber. They used cut-offs from the building industry and old packing crates and a little bit of this and that from the desert and the woods and the river and whatever they could find. And so he learned how to work with the free forms from nature. In the meantime, my dad's professor contacted Mr. Raymond, who had left Japan because of the war and settled in Pennsylvania. This professor from MIT asked Mr. Raymond to sponsor us to move to the East Coast. They sort of had to sign a guarantee they would keep us out of trouble because we were still considered suspicious aliens even though we were all born in the United States. And so that's why we're in Bucks County. Dad thought it was prophetic that the place was called New Hope because it was certainly New Hope after the war. He developed friendships with a lot of the artists who lived in the countryside in the town of New Hope. He started making things out of the milk house at the Raymond farm because he was only allowed to do chicken farming on the Raymond farm. He wasn't supposed to work on architecture. He eventually went out and rented a little cottage on Aquatong and worked out of the garage. Then he found the property where we are in New Hope. Started with 3 acres that he bartered for labor on the farm. We lived in an old army tent, and Dad built the shop first so he could build furniture, and the house second. Gradually was able to add more land, so we have 8.8 acres now, and there are about 14 buildings on the property.
Mira told me that her father worked with some furniture manufacturing companies, but grew disillusioned, and after 1964, never pursued mass production again.
He continued on in his belief that it's better to make things by hand and with real wood and real people and not get involved in mass production. So what he set up was a protest to mass production, and he was able to keep it going all of his life. He passed away in 1990, and we've been keeping it going for 25 years since his death, and hopefully the tradition will be able to continue into the future.
Well, George Nakashima is not the only great furniture maker in the show. There's also this transplanted son of Massachusetts who is wicked good.
My name is Michael Hurwitz. I'm a furniture maker. Work mostly in wood. That was my training. A lot of the pieces incorporate different materials, but wood is my primary medium. I moved to Philadelphia in 1985 from Boston in order to teach at what is now University of the Arts. And I'm a big proponent of living in Philadelphia. It's been a great place to live and work.
There's a real geometric complexity to your work.
That's a way to describe whatever happened, but it's not how I go about conceiving of a piece or making a piece. I doubt I could pass a 7th grade geometry class, but I think for some people it's a way to understand the world and sort of superimpose a structure over something that happens some other way. A primary interest is how structure helps define the work.
I was crawling around under some of them, and one of them I started moving around. Is it meant to rock?
I'm assuming it was the rocking chaise, which is intended to rock. Yeah, that's what it's there for. You might want to be on it rather than under it when that happens, but feel free to sit on it and rock.
I love it. It's wonderful.
That's from 1989. It's a piece that exemplified a lot of the concerns that I had that are continuous throughout my career.
I noticed some drawings. Do you start your work by drawing it out first?
I do, but they don't look like the drawings that you saw. The drawings that you saw are technical drawings that were meant to sell the project, to help describe it to the client that had commissioned it. When I do drawings, I do sketches that help me visualize a piece that isn't fully visualized yet. So they're more like freehand sketches where I can kind of rotate a form and imagine it from 360 degrees.
I have to say that as I've been talking to Michael, he's been constantly waving at people who come in. I guess you have a lot of friends in the craft world.
Well, I live 2 blocks away. This is my hometown. I mean, at this point, Philly is my hometown. I've been here 30 years, so got some friends coming. Yeah.
Has a life in crafts been a good one for you?
I can't imagine what it would be otherwise, but it's been good. I mean, which is not to say that it's been lucrative, but it has been a rewarding journey, and it ain't over yet.
Well, speaking of journeys that are far from over, I got to talk to the oldest fellow in the show. He joined the American Craft Council when your humble 63-year-old videographer was 5 years old.
I'm Paul Smith, and these photographs are from my large collection of photographs I have taken of artists since 1985-84. I've taken them in studios and at special events, and as a result, it's become a very large personal archive of 224 artists that are in a book that has recently been published. I'm donating the prints to the Center for Art and Wood for their permanent collection.
What got you interested in photographing craftspeople?
I was with the American Craft Council for 30 years and director of its museum for 24 of those. So I have had a very privileged and special association with this vast community since 1957 when I joined the organization. I have had that privileged and special occasion to meet all these artists. In most cases, I have shown all their work in important exhibitions. They're part of my friends' community in the craft world. So I say this is really a personal journal of my collection of these artists. There were many others. I wish I had started photographing earlier, but it still represents a lot of the masters, as the book title is Masters of Craft, who really have been so important, not only nationally known, but internationally.
In your experience, do craftspeople tend to be nice?
I think people who work with their hands and create works, whether it be a piece of jewelry or furniture or a ceramic vessel or sculpture, find it a very rewarding experience to make something physically, to create some form that is a personal statement. And I think that's a rewarding aspect. Also, these artisans know each other and become friends. In my introduction to the book, I talk about the community of the craft world, which is very strong, where people know each other across the country. And so there is a humanistic aspect to this specialized area of the arts that I don't think you find as much in the painting world or photography world or some of the other specialized areas.
Speaking of specialized areas, what about the subset of the woodworking community who, frankly, just aren't all that into wood?
We have Bruce Metcalf.
I'm Bruce Metcalf. Hi.
If you want wood, don't buy his work.
The Bruce Metcalf story. I was trained 45 years ago at Syracuse University. Metals, and that's what it was at the time. I rather quickly branched out into what were called alternative materials. Jewelry making is seen as an alternative, not in the mainstream. I actually carve wood like a jeweler would carve it. I don't carve it like a woodworker. A woodworker would use chisels. I use a flexible shaft machine. I rough them out on a bandsaw, belt sander, and then I do most of the shaping with files and a flex shaft. So it's not the way most woodworkers approach it, but it also gives me an opportunity to get levels of detail which are fundamentally impossible with chisels. I can make virtually any form, and some of them here are actually pretty tricky in terms of how they're carved. They're pretty good pieces of craftsmanship. The other thing that I don't share in common with a lot of wood turners and woodworkers is I'm not all that interested in the wood. There tends to be this fetishization of grain and color, and I'm not interested. Instead, generally, I paint the wood.
So this is carved wood, and it's been airbrushed to get that really, really slick surface on it, and it's luscious.
And I cover it up so it becomes just an image instead of something you identify as being made out of wood. I'm going for the image. And the images themselves are coming from all over the place. Some are coming from the decorative arts, sculpture, from nature, and some are of my own invention. These are pastiches of images from all over the place, and I join them together either in small piles, which the brooches are, or in sequences or strings, which the necklaces are. They're basically an arrangement of forms strung together end to end that go around the neck. So they're two fundamentally different ways of organizing things.
Is it just me being a dirty old man, or is there a little bit of sexuality going on here?
Oh, there's tons of sex. These are drenched in sex. Yeah, I'm glad you picked that up because it sure is there, and that's by design. And that has to do with the ancient roles of jewelry. Jewelry has always been involved in adornment and therefore in making somebody more attractive or alluring, which of course gets directly to sex. And the oldest known jewelry is actually about 110,000 years old. They're shells called Nacerius shells, and they are functionally images of the women's genitalia. So the oldest known jewelry is sexual in nature. And it continues up to the present day.
I think Bruce is inviting you to his high school prom.
Right?
The process of putting an engagement ring on a finger is a reenactment of the sex act, which nobody thinks about, but it's there and it's plain if you actually start to think about it.
Do you sell these as jewelry or as art objects? Are they worn by women?
Almost all my collectors wear them. There's a couple that are too fragile. If that happens, it's sort of an accident, it's a failure of engineering. But I just have to tell the collector, you can't wear this. And actually, I lost a sale recently because of that. She wanted to wear the thing, so she wouldn't buy it.
These are just so terrific.
All right, thanks.
If Bruce Metcalf is suspect just because he hides his wood under paint, our last fellow must also be a black sheep. My goodness, she even uses metal in her work.
My name is Sharon Church. I am thrilled to be a part of this exhibition at the Center for Art and Wood. I am a sculptor, jeweler, and professor emerita at the University of the Arts. I started out as a jeweler, studying with Earl Pardon at Skidmore College, and then I went to RIT, and this is a form of a mini retrospective for me. You can see work that I did in graduate school and the work that followed as I became an abrasive wood carver. Over time, I was looking for a material that was lightweight, that I could put on the body, and that was wood. I was a carver because of my jewelry experience. I was in production, and in order to cast waxes, I learned how to carve. It was not hard to move away from carving wax into carving wood. I got to like carving wood so much that I eventually started to carve wood for my castings. It's sort of a wonderful story. It happened over 40 years of working in the studio, but here I am, a wood carver who started out as a metalsmith, and my wood friends tell me all the time I don't really carve wood because I work abrasively. I marvel at people who can actually carve wood, who work subtractively. My hero is Grinling Gibbons. He was Victorian, but he was the most eloquent maker in wood. And I like to think that I follow in his footsteps a tiny little bit because I carve natural forms. And that was his great gift. I show one of my carvings, Persephone's Bouquet, and it sits next to a very simple ring made out of silver and ebony, which I did under Earl Pardon's tutelage way back in the late 60s. So you can see that my love for wood grew, never left me.
You also draw very well. Obviously have a love of animals.
Yes.
And flies.
Yeah. Well, I tend to get stuck on an idea. It takes me a long time to make my work. I like to say that 80% of what I do ends up in the scrap bin. I'm a perfectionist, naturally, and I'm constantly looking for ways of resolving my problems. When I was carving this frog, all of a sudden one of its fingers went flying across the studio. I had knocked it off with a bit that was a little bit too abrasive. Now what am I going to do? But I learned about a fake wood that is an epoxy. You knead it together with your hands like a putty. And I loved the way that worked out. So mistakes are really important to what I do. That piece right there, I always wondered if I could make real jewelry. And another Philadelphia collector commissioned me to make a diamond clasp. And that diamond clasp was worth as much as we had paid for our house. This surface here is what we call pavé, a French word that means paved. Think of paved streets or paved brickwork. The stones are set one next to another. One prong holds two stones. This is a very strenuous activity, and I hired out that work. Much of the jewelry industry is parsed like that. I was able to go to the diamond setter with my rendering and the castings that I had produced, and he told me how many diamonds to get, what sizes. He did all of that hard work, and set the stones. And I got over my fear, and I thought, okay, I now know I can handle this, and I was freed of it. As a jeweler, I think you have to be sensitive to other people because they're going to wear your work. And that's an important consideration to keep in mind the whole time you're at the bench.
Speaking of wearing your work, that is beautiful. What's that made out of?
This is oxidized sterling silver and diamonds. This is the kind of thing I used to teach to my students. So I thought it was important to make a piece that embodied some of the techniques that I was showing to the students, because they probably wondered, why am I doing this stuff?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Zwilling. I'm the curator of the Clay Studio, and we are having a related exhibition to the one here at the Center for Art and Wood. Ours is called Fellowship in Clay.
After filming these 6 charming fellows all day, you might think some of their graciousness would have rubbed off on me. But no. I snarkily asked Jennifer if the Clay Studio and the other Masters of Craft venues were jealous that this was the best show.
Well, Albert's gallery always looks beautiful, but we think ours looks nice too.
And of course she was right.
The Art Alliance is spectacular. The Clay Studio is terrific. Of course, the Art Museum you should go see. And this is the example of the quality of work that Craft Now is expecting to bring to a national, international audience.
But when you come to Philadelphia to see these 4 shows, come here first. Why? Because we at the Center for Art and Wood
do really look at the soul of the tree.